Okay, so we're finishing off Siman Tes Vov. We've got the last two Seifim, Seif Hey and Seif Vov. Says the Mechaba in Seif Hey, Im Nikra Mehanekev Shahasitzis Toleboy Lamato. What happens if you have a tear at the very bottom of the sitzis, under the corner of the beged, where the sitzis are attached to the beged, and there's a tear down from the hole towards the bottom of the beged? So, in Kodem Hatola Sitzis Lekareya, what came first? If the putting of the sitzis was there first, and then afterwards it tore, she'osa sitzis hoyshon b'shas hakera, that the sitzis were in place at the time where it tore, kasha. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Mairi b'shelo tofro, we haven't stitched it yet, for kamash melon, the afal gav de lo nishtayim ole keshar gudel, even though the sitzis have gone down lower than the shear we always said was from the joint to the top of the nail, it's gone below that minimum shear. We only need that shear at the time when you actually put on the sitzis onto the beged, and therefore, since these sitzis were put on the beged in the correct way, then there's no problem. And then subsequently they were torn. That's not a problem. We did say earlier that Marasayan you should stitch it up, but that's not the issue here. If you want to stitch up the tear, so then, if the beged is made out of wool, make sure you stitch it with other material, not with woolen material. And you don't need to take off the sitzis and to reattach them after you've repaired it and stitched it up, because the knaf was never possible. But if the beged is made out of other material, like we said in the previous sif, but according to Rashi, there's a concern, maybe there'll be some leftover material you've used to repair the beged, and people will confuse it with the sitzis. Even though there is sitzis there, and therefore what's the concern? Chazal will always worried. Rashi says that the concern is always that people will confuse the sitzis material, the strings themselves, with the stitches used to repair the beged. Therefore, make sure you repair it with other material. Use better some sort of coloured material, coloured thread to stitch it. Our minhag nowadays is to use only white material for sitzis, and therefore if you use a different colour thread, then it'll be very clear that it's not part of the sitzis. Therefore we're not gozer. Maybe you left over a bit of the sphira l'shem sitzis. Okay, let's continue the mechaba. Ve'im nikra v'nishtayim mimenu kolshu utfaro. If, however, it ripped, and then you repaired it, and then afterwards you put the sitzis on, imhu shel tzemer, if the material is made out of tzemer, then kosher lekula alma, then it's kosher according to everybody. V'imhu shel shar minim, if it's made out of other material, shederech litvar bechutin shel oisamin, and the minhag is to stitch it with that material, lo yitvar ledas Rashi, because again, the concern is that Rashi will say that you're going to confuse it with that material with one of the sitzis. V'im nikra utfaro v'acha chitel bo sitzis, then if, however, it tears, utfaro, and then you stitch it up, v'achakach hitel bo sitzis, and then later you put the sitzis on, ikil isfuki, then there is going to be a sofek, as we'll discuss. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Excuse me. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot and Yutes. Kosher lekula alma. To the Rashi, Kiven shah beged hu shel tzemer, since the beged is made out of wool, there's no concern that you're using material made out of other material that they'll be considered confused with sitzis. Since you've left some of the beged, there was a bit of the corner of the beged there, lo nispatam maturas beged, it's never lost its status as a beged, and therefore there's no problem. How much more so that previously, where the Yesh Omrim says that if you stitch it and then afterwards attach to the sitzis is kosher, how much more so over here? Because the putting the sitzis on was done after you've done the stitching and the repair work. Lo yitvar, this is going on Sivkot and Chof, is going on the das of Rashi. We said, Im hushal shar minim shederech litfer b'chutin shelo samin, according to Rashi, lo yitfer, rotzulema ba'isa hamin, with that min, with that material that the tzitzis is made out of. Aval b'min acher yesh lahakel, v'yosetov b'chut savua v'chanal b'sif ha'kotin yudches. But better to use a colored thread, like I said previously in Sif Kotin Yudches, says the Mishnah Berurah. Sif Kotin Chof Aleph. Ve'im nikra utforo v'achakach hitzabo sitzis ikalis fuke. If it rips, and then you attach the sitzis, there is a suffix. What does that mean? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotin Chof Aleph. Rotzulema. Shenikra kula minekev atzoif hasofa. So the bottom of the sitzis tears from the hole all the way down to the edge of the beged. Lochein ikalis fuke. Now you've got a suffix. The afim ha-beged hu shetzemer, even if the beged is made out of wool. V'yitferenu b'chutei shar minim, and you stitched it with other types of material. To the Rashi b'vadai muta. Rashi has no concern in that situation. Afilu hochi efshed l'Rav Amram posel. Still, according to the Shitta of Rav Amram, it could still be possible to kiven de lo nishtayr kolshu, so that since a little bit did not remain, there was a tear all the way down to the bottom. Halamavu b'sif hakodim. We said in the previous sif, the Ladea Rishona commands a posuk domi, that according to the first opinion, it's as if it's cut off. V'lo yoel tefira im yirtze lahatel sitzachkach. Afim yirtze lahatel sitzachkach. And stitching on and restitching it doesn't help, even if you want to subsequently put on the sitzis afterwards, because then that little bit that is cut off is considered bottle legamre, and it's lost its shem beged. Perhaps, however, this is better. But perhaps it's different in this case because it's not as bad, because maybe the cut is going down, but it's not. It's still sholem on two sides, and it's considered like a hole in the middle, and therefore according to Rav Amram, maybe it still retains its status of a beged. And this is the doubt of the Shulchan Aruch. The Taz argues, or Poisek, the Enkan Sofik, he says there is no doubt in this situation. He says, according to everybody, if you put the sitzis on after you've repaired the beged, it's kosher. Which is similar to what we said previously, that if you take a patch of 3x3 etzbois and you place that underneath it, then you're definitely covered, because it's a significant beged. And if you cannot do that, and you just need to repair the beged, yesh lahakel ka'taz, then you can be maker like the taz. The belav hochi halo kosavne b'sif kotten tesvov, the das achronim the tfir muchshav chibur michshav chibur u'moyel af b'nikra knaf legamri b'mkoymei, that the tfira is considered a chibur, and it will help even if the knaf is torn in that place. Okay, let's just finish off. Halacha vov sif vov. Says the Mechaber, if a person stitches chatichas beged, a piece of material, in the corner of the Tallis, like we do, we reinforce the hole where the sitzis is with more material. If the Tallis is made out of silk, and you use chut meshi, lavon, yesh lochash bedover ledas Rashi, then according to Rashi, shelo tehei shum tefira lamata mishalosh lamala mikoshe gadol, that according to Rashi, we're always concerned that the repairing threads will be confused with the sitzis, and therefore there should not be any stitching where the sitzis should be. Where should the sitzis be? We've said before, at least more than the joint to the top of the thumb from the edge of the beged, but not more than 3 etzbois in. So between those two distances, according to Rashi, there shouldn't be any stitching there. Says the Ramah, and so too, whenever you use the thread to repair with the same min of the sitzis, that you might take that thread and use it as one of the sitzis, that is Rashi's concern. Says the Mishnah Berurah, shel meshi, De'imhu shel tzemer, because if it's made out of tzemer, kvar nisbar de'ein lochush klal, because we've already said we don't have to worry about it at all. And then in that situation you can even stitch it within the gimel etzbois of the corner. B'chut meshi, sif koten chaf gimel, v'hu adinim ha-tallis shel shar minim. And so too, if the tallis is made out of other material, dafke im ha-chut hu me'oisa ha-min gufa. Dafke if the chut is from that min itself. Then you can be makel. Because then you are not worried that you're going to use that material for the tzitzis, because only pote elamino. Sifchot chaf daled lovon the imhu tzavua, because if you use a colored one gamkein in lochash klal shem yikochen the tzitzis, we're not worried you might mistake that and use it for tzitzis. The inon nogim lasu tzitzis savuim, because our minhag, says the Mishnah Berurah, is not to use colored tzitzis. K'mosh of siman tes sif hey lamata migimel. So this is going on the line of the Mechaber, which says that according to Rashi, you shouldn't do any stitching between those 2 points, the joint to the top of the finger, which is the minimum, and the 3 etzbois, which has got to be not more than that in. So between those 2 points is where you're going to be doing your stitching. You shouldn't stitch there. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Chafei Lamata Megimel, the Shom Hu Mokam HaTzitzis, because that's where you put the tzitzis. Avol Kashat Tfira Lamala Megimel, but if the stitching is above Gimel etzbois, Ulamata Mekesha Agodel, or it's within, lower than the Kesha Agudel, then Ein Lochash Yikachen L'Tzitzis. No one's going to mistake those threads for tzitzis. K'moshe Kosov Siman Yud Aleph. V'soviv hanekev also litva b'chut lavon. Around the hole, you shouldn't stitch with white thread. But our talisos, our tallis nowadays are made out of wool, and therefore there isn't a concern like we've discussed. B'chol makom, this is going on the Ramah. V'uadin b'chol makom shetofa b'chut shu min hatzitzis tzachashin shem yikachos achut hatzitzis b'chol makom rotzolema im nikra v'nishtayim imenu kol shehu, if a little bit stays over, v'chiyah gavna mavur le'el b'sif hey, like we described in the previous sif. So that is the end of Siman Tes Vav.